Okay, so we're just going around everywhere, and basically what we're trying to do is tidy up all these seams. So I've painted some acrylic on there and we've sanded down. So as I say, we've got nice joints on here. Obviously these edges, very noticeable, so they've got to be nice along here. Also what we're doing, we're rescribing anything that we've taken out. I've rescribed the nose situation and that's all looking fine. And I've just rescribed this panel line around this joint to disguise the actual reason it's a lump. It's very hard to see at the moment. It works well through the naked eye, but you'll never be able to see it on camera. But what we've done, I've used dino tape, you know, this type of stuff, cut it in half and we've stuck it on. And although it's losing its sticky a bit, I'm hoping I can show you down. Now I'm not using the P cutter to get in here because it's got filler in there and the glue probably underneath is still going to be a little bit soft and things like that. So I'm going to use a needle, and all we're going to do is start at the bottom and then butting up against our Dymo tape. We're just going to run it around and we're just going to try and keep it an average sort of pressure as we go right the way round, and we're not 90 degrees and scratching around, we're actually pushing down because there's a slight bit of give in it. It'll just help with that. It's very hard for you to see because obviously I need to see what I'm doing here, but basically we're just running it round that seam line that was already there. So if we just whip that off and we just stick it to the underside, and hopefully it will marry up with the one at the top. Obviously I'm doing this completely back to front so you can see, but we're just going to go in, that's it, and as I say, just keep your pin up against the Dymo tape, and there we go, and hopefully that has. And what we can do now, because there's a bit of a trench on there, we can actually help it round with by freehand and follow it round, and there we go, we've got a nice trench in there. So then when it's obviously painted in that, you might still see it, but when the wash goes on and makes a little black line, it'd be very hard to spot it. So that one's done now. Tidied up all the areas, and then I think we're basically ready to go. We can install these inside doors, the actual inner parts here. They're a bit tricky and fiddly to get in, admittedly. They sort of go sometimes and other times they're a bit of a nightmare, but they're going to sit on the inside like that, and there's always a little gap down here at the back. So if I just zoom you in a bit so you can see a bit better, but it sits in there, and as long as the bottom is flush with the top of the intake, you'll be fine. So that's that side, and then we can do the same for the other side. So if you just literally push in from the bottom like that, and in that one goes as well, and we can glue them into position, and then that's the base basically all done. And then next thing we can do is actually get the front section put on. Okay, all the parts now are totally dry, and this is overnight, so this is the next morning. It's going to need a sand around and various bits of scribing and things like that, but first of all I want to marry up the front fuselage onto the rear section. Now there's no real easy way, there's no cure, there's no easy fix to doing this. This is just one of those things that unfortunately is a bit of trial and error, trying to get the best lineup you possibly can. Sometimes it helps by sanding down these and just by dry fitting, seeing how it fits. But obviously on the forward fuselage here, you can see it's got little indentations which line up with these underneath, but they're never ever a perfectly brilliant fit. So really what I tend to do is you put it in, see where it's touching and where it's, you know, obviously butting up against things too well or not enough, and various bits and pieces like that, and really just try and get it as best as you can by dry fitting it at this stage. And then once you actually have got a very good fit, or as best as you're going to get, is to then literally, I usually do a couple of drops of super glue around there, and just to basically hold it, and then go around it with a liquid weld and then sand and filler it as required. But this is one of those ones, unfortunately I can't really show you the best way of doing it. But you know, the theory is it comes along and just plonks in the front. Never that simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a fiddle and get it fixed on there, but because I sort of need to see it a little bit more than you do to make sure it's lined up well, it's not going to be very easy to film, and also it'll probably take a long time where I'm sanding, test fitting and things like that. Okay, so we've got a fix on here. So what was it? Literally a bit of super glue is holding this at the moment. If I bring you in, I can show you sort of the line we get. I'm going to have to hold this because literally I've just done it. Let's move a few things out of the way. There we go. As you can see, it's in there, and it's quite a nice join. Okay, I'm going to temp fake now. Let go. Okay, so we're around, obviously under here. I know it's a bit tricky because of the lighting and things, but it is on there. But we are going to need to sand and fill, but it's just basically getting it there as much as you can. Obviously underneath you want the spread to roughly be the same, but as I say, because you're holding the top and things like that, it's very hard to sort of juggle it around to make sure you're okay. My advice really is to get this seam as best as you can around the top, because the thing is, that's the one everyone's going to see. Nobody's going to really look down under here. Unless you're a model maker who's looking to see if you've got a good seam line. But apart from that, everybody else who'll be looking won't be looking down here anyway. So what we've got to do in a moment when that's totally dry is just finish up under here by putting this plate on here that sort of finishes off the forward fuselage. Once it's all totally dry, we'll get that in and fitted in. There again, sometimes that drops in, no problem. Other times you get little gaps and various bits and pieces. So we'll just take our time and dry fitting those in there and getting them all in there to look nice. But I'm very happy with the way it's going so far. You know, we're sort of getting to Tomcat shape, as we're saying, and obviously these wings literally are just a push fit straight in, and then they click in like so. Obviously we're going to have them all folded up in anyway, but the handy thing is, because they pull out like that, it's great for storage and for travelling. You can literally just whip the wings off and away you go. So we're going to leave that there for about 20 minutes. I've used a little bit of kicker on it anyway to sort of help it out. As another quick little tip, I suppose, when you do it, all I literally do is put the super glue to one side, run it round on the plastic, so when it pushes together, and obviously you get the little bubbles of it coming up, give it a squirt with kicker and it lets it flow. It almost like a thinner effect on the actual CA on the super glue, so it flows down and makes that a far better join. Okay, so now we've been working on it, just tidying up little areas, and we've been sort of dry fitting this bottom plate in as best as we can. Obviously, because we've got the resin cockpit in there as well, it might have distorted what's going on down in there. So if I just bring you over a little bit and bring you in, you can see what we're up to a little bit better. So what we've actually got this plate here trying to fit in, as I was saying. You know, it's one of those things you need to sand, and I have done. I've taken a little bit off of this side here, and I've made sure it's sanded this down just a little bit lower, because when I put it down there was quite a nasty step at the back here. So I've actually sanded it down on the rear like so, and actually now once we're in like here, it all fits in there quite nicely. And there's the smallest of tiniest little gaps there, but what will happen is I'm hoping I'm going to pop a little bit of super glue and kicker on there, and it will take care of that. Now also the thing is, these missile bays don't totally line up. Now normally I would have a fiddle and we would go round, but because we're going to have the actual Phoenix missiles racks, they're going to cover them completely, you're not going to see it. So a bit of a shortcut, we won't worry about that. If we were, we would have to fiddle with it a little bit more just to get it all totally lined up and in the right place. So we're going to get this one all in and glued in now. So that's just going to sit there literally just like this. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually use a little bit of super glue for this, just in a few points. I'm not going to go around everywhere with it, but because there's gaps here, there and everywhere, this will help take care of those. Let's pop a bit on the back here. Like so. Okay, so we're going to get this side in here. So we're going to push down to the back. Get this front side in. Just like so. And what we're going to do is just going to hold it there. We won't actually use any kicker as such for the moment, because we're just going to hold it there until it gets a grip, and then we'll give it a squirt with a bit of kicker. Okay, so we've got that in there now. As you can see, it's quite a nice sort of join there. There's a small little step just here, but we can sand that down. As I say, we're not too paranoid about it, because there's a Phoenix missile going to sit right over the top of that. So the middle part is smooth, it's just this edge. So we can sand that down, not worry about rescribing it, and then the racks will go right on top. So we're just going to do a little bit of clean up work with that. We're going to sand it down and just make sure we're all in there nicely. Okay, although I was more than happy with the join on there, what I've actually done is just pop around with a little bit of filler just to take care of anything. Because you're using super glue, sometimes it's very hard to get it a smooth transition between the plastic and the actual the super glue join itself. You get a little step, and when you're sanding it, very hard to get it to work. So that's why I've actually come in with a filler. Certain joins on here where you can see that step quite, it's prominent. So that's why we've done that. We had a little problem up the front here, had a tiny little hole where we'd sanded through a little bit too much, so we've had to sort of build that up again. So we're going to let that dry for about half an hour, come back, sand it off, and then we can get really going then on really bringing this aircraft together. Okay, so we've got lots and lots of pieces on the go now. I've just made a couple of swipes and cleaned up the underside with this filler down in here on the nose. Just got this a little bit thicker on the top, if you like, so it's going to take a little bit more to dry. It's quite a cloudy day out there today. Normally get it in the sun, takes about half an hour. Cloudy day, a bit more than that. Okay, so what else have we been doing? We've been getting some parts off the sprue. We've got the Phoenix missile racks, which also act as the bomb racks, so they're going to go up there as well. Also we've got in there, we've done the fuel tanks that are going to fit onto the air intakes under here. They're done, and also they're completely sanded and rescribed as well, because obviously one thing you notice on certain models you look at perhaps, which is a real shame, is that when you get a curved surface like this, obviously they've sanded and taken care of the seam, but unfortunately they haven't rescribed the line. So obviously when you come back with a wash, or even if it's just paint, you notice there's like a line running all the way down. So it's always best to rescribe that. And also once you've done, if you have used a file to do it, come along with a sponge, and that will just round it back off nicely, because it won't do the flat area, but it will do the corners of the raised area, if you like, and it will just re-round it all off and make it look nice. So those two are all done now, so they can go in a separate box I have down here, which has basically got all the completed parts in. Okay, so also we've done the wings. We've put on the leading edges as well. We've glued them in because it'll be quite easy to mask them up and spray them with a little bit of titanium. Currently here I'm actually working on the outboard missile racks, which would be the Phoenix missile racks, if you like. If you're going to be doing it as that, we're going to stick a lantern pod on it and stick a couple of laser guided bombs underneath. We've got some little parts on their way for that as we speak. Right, so what I'm doing now is just rescribing that line that goes behind the actual cockpit there, which makes the join. And as you can see, I've used Dymo tape for that, because really it's quite a complex curve, and trying to get, if you're tooling here in a P cutter, obviously because I've gone over filler and super glue that's gone hard, the P cutter tends to drag, it doesn't make a smooth line, so it's a lot easier to do it with a needle. Gentle scrape, and just scrape it through. To do now is fit these missile racks on. These are things that obviously, it's personal choice. You can do it now, you can do it later, you can not have them on there, you can have them on there, whichever way you're going to do it. So what we're going to do, obviously you have got a left and a right. They make a little hole for the nose wheel to come back. So basically these little tabs in here go into these locating areas. It's this side, isn't it? That's it. And you'll have one that'll sit like that, okay, and the other one will simply sit like so on there. Now sometimes you might get, and I'm hoping we have, which we have, you might get, as you see, a nice little hole just down in there. Now the thing is, if you give it a bit of a push, it will mould in without a problem, but it always happens every time. It's this front half seems slightly higher than the back half. It's all blended in there nicely, and you're not going to be able to see it with the naked eye. It's just that obviously when you've got a flat, like a ruler surface going along here, it does that. So we'll get those glued on board in a moment. And the other thing, whilst we're working underneath here, we're going to put the tail hook area. That's basically going to come back here and is going to fit back here already for the tail hook. And what I'm going to do is, you don't have to put the actual hook in there at the moment, because it will just bend slightly apart, because you do have the worry of it being knocked off. So I'm going to actually put it on last. So we're going to get those bits on. Okay, so we've got this all drying down underneath. Now what I've done is I've used a sanding block and that, and we've done to pull that up in there to get rid of that gap. So that's almost all dry now in there, so that's looking good. The other thing we've done, we've put the sensor pod on the front now, on the chin there, so that's in there. Obviously make sure you get the right one. The kit does come with them, all of them, every single one that ever happened. So you'll need the new sprue to get the twin one like this that goes on the front there like that. So basically that's the fuselage all taken care of. Obviously we've got to put some bits back on here. The actual inflatable bags for the wings go back, but as I said before, we're going to leave them off for the minute because we can actually paint them separately and put them on afterwards. Just saves a bit of masking up and things. The other thing I've done quickly whilst we were here is I've got the engine nozzles for the rear. Now obviously you can have them open or close. The open one, you get multiple ones and they all just drop in there. Now the thing is, sometimes you get, as we got here, a little gap in there. It's best to let it go sort of halfway dry, if you like, and then if you get a bit of tape, okay, where you've got that gap, slightly pinched together, bit of masking tape just to hold it, and then just pop along with your glue, your extra thin, and give it a drop there, and it will actually then weld up that little line. And you can use the tape on there to hold it in there, or you know, like that's quite a small one, it's not going to need it, but this one it needed it, it's going to be there. And what will happen is it will just weld up that little line in there and take care of any gaps. Okay, so the next thing we can do is get this undercarriage together, as we were saying. So here we have the completed leg. That's the one I did earlier, so to speak. Now listen, it's one of those things, you don't want to be around playing with this one too much. It's a very weak join there. And although super glue is great for holding on for certain things, you know, for very speed things and everything else, if you're going to use it for a structural part like this, I would recommend using your normal weld type glue, because that way when it does go totally hard, although it's going to take a bit longer, when it does go hard it's going to be completely solid. Other times if you use a bit of super glue, perhaps you might move your model at a later date, and it's always going to be a weak area, because if it's going to shatter or fracture, that's where it'll do it. And obviously on your undercarriage, your aircraft, you know, you do tend to push them around for dusting and moving, things like that. That's where it's going to happen. So I'd recommend using your normal glue. Okay, so to get these together, this is the main legs. Basically you have your various parts. To start with, obviously we've got the bottom half, you have two halves to go together. Now you have to check for flashing and bits and pieces all over these, because they have a habit of being a bit flashy. But what I do, pop a clamp on it just like that, and then we can brush our glue right down the middle, and then that way you don't run the risk of sticking a fingerprint on it, because it's quite a tight area to get in and do. So that's that part done, and then underneath we just simply pop a bit of glue on the bottom, and then it's the pointy part of the spring, and that sits up on the bottom. Just give it a drop more. And what you can also do, if you get some tweezers, is just squeeze the sides together, because they have a habit of separating. So if you can see, we do it sort of like that, just in there, and then again at the top here, and this one will go on the top and sit down. Now these are a bit more of a tighter fit to get in up there, and then obviously you're pushing one down, pulling one up, and hopefully you should meet somewhere in the middle. Obviously I'll do this slightly backwards, and when you get them together and lined up like that, if you come along with liquid cement, and it'll weld it across like that. Yeah, well, do you see that? Bring it a little bit closer. You see, so we get it so it sits just like that. And then it's quite a simple job of the top bit sits on top. As I'll say, this is the thing, I'm going to use liquid cement in there just like that. Okay, and then this top, and there's a little nick just out of this one, just down on this side, on the top here, and then that sits in, and then this part here, right, sorry I'm losing you there, this bit sticking out here, that little peg it's got on it actually goes in that little nick. So what I tend to do is just give it a drop of glue, okay, and then we're just going to push that in a bit, and it should all sit in there. There we go, that's in, and it's in, and that's your main undercarriage leg done. So that's that one done, and we can go with the other one to dry, and then obviously we'll leave those a long time because we want those to totally dry. Okay, the main nose gear, it's quite straightforward. bit flashy again, had to do a lot of cleaning up with it. But what you're going to get is slightly different. You've actually got the option, you get two of these. This one is in the up position. Obviously you've got your sheath there for obviously where the spring is. For the compression, obviously when it bears down you get a smaller area, but that will be painted silver. But obviously with the kit you actually get the option of having it in the firing position when it's on the catapult. So this is lowered down, and then obviously the actual torque bar goes down onto the shuttle, which then pulls it off the carrier, and it all bends down and looks good. If you're doing a diorama, you can make a cracking one out of the kit because it's all geared up for it. So obviously you could have the wings swept forward, deployed, put the crew in, and have it looking like it's just about to be fired off the deck, which is quite a nice touch. So what we're going to do is going to put this one together, and as I say, a bit tricky the way it actually goes together. If I just bring you in a little bit in here, because what you've actually got, you might notice you've got two halves for the top this time instead of for the bottom, these two, and they will go together like so. But what you've actually got is the way that got a little peg here, so that it will fit into the inside like this, like so, and then the nose wheel can twist. Now that's if you want it to. If you don't, glue it together. Obviously it has to be in the sideways position to do it. So what we're going to do, we're going to put a bit of glue, extra thin, just at the top, and we're going to do this laying down just because it's easier. Okay, we just move those bits out of the way. Right, so we'll lay this one on just like that, and then this top half can come along, and literally we're going to sit that on the top like so, and then you could let that dry for a moment, and then we can go around and sort it all out. So all we do is try and get it into position as best as we can. Now if you are using liquid cement like we're doing here, what you're going to have to do is keep manoeuvring this so it doesn't dry, because obviously if it dries it's going to affect your nose wheel and its steering, as in it's not going to want to do it. So you are going to have to keep manoeuvring it all around. If you want to lock it in position, obviously, you know, that's your option. You can do, which is, to be honest, the one that I do, because I don't like it moving because I have a habit of coming off at some part. But all you do is make the hole faces the rear, because at the rear point we've got the actual back of the assembly, if you like, and it's going to go on the back and it's going to plug in here and go up. Okay, so the last thing to go on is the bar. So we've got some glue on there. Very gently tap that down into position. We just use a little bit more glue because it is a bit of a fiddly one, and that goes on just like that. So there we go. We've got to put our light on, and what we'll do, we're going to let this totally dry, then we'll get the light fitted on the front here as well, and then we can paint it all white. We'll mask up obviously the glass half, paint the back silver, and then spray it all white so it's all ready. So what we're going to do, we're going to put a clamp on this and keep it up out of the way like so that can sit there just like that and all drying. Okay, so there we go, we're getting very, very close to getting things all sort of together now. What I'm going to do next is we're going to put the HUD on its photo etch parts. So we're going to put those on with a little bit of super glue and install the clear parts, and then we can get the canopy blue tacked in place just like this, and then once that's in we can then start thinking about sort of preparing it all for spraying. Okay, so things are really rapidly moving forward now. We've almost finished the construction part of the build. I've glued the front on, we've put the clear part and the HUD in there, and I've blue tacked the canopy down in place. Now to give us an idea of really how big this thing is going to be when it's done, we just click the wings in. One there. Okay, and we're going to have one in here. So we're saying if you're going to have it, you know, wings open, as you can see, we're in the widest setting the camera will go, but it will definitely need a bit of display room. But obviously we're going to have the wings folded back, so to speak, and obviously the tails pop in the back like this, and it will end up something like that, so it's not going to take up too much room. As I say, we've got the tails done as well, but obviously for painting and ease and things like that, we're going to pop them on afterwards. But it is a big model, it's a very big, impressive one, and now at this stage it's really where it's all come together. So what we can do now is start to get some paint on roughly in. I've still been around with some more seams and everything, got some more grey paint going down in here just to check seams and make sure they're all okay before we get into prime, and then when we prime we can really see what we've got. So next what we're going to do is take care of a bit of white spraying. So what we're going to do is going to get the undercarriage all together, the engines as well, because down inside here we're going to do white, and then we can dirty it up with some greys to give it a real sort of tonal a dirtiness appearance in there. Obviously then we can spray the wheel wells at the same time and do everything else that's white, obviously insides of the actual gear doors, things like that. So the entire white process is done. Then we can do our usual thing of getting all the doors in there and then prime over and then pre-shade and work our way through the painting. Okay, now, so we're going to get some white paint on. Now, for doing wheel wells and things like that, as you may have seen on my other videos, I basically just use neat white paint. Now, sometimes I use Valero's, but if I can and have got it, I will always actually use Tamiya XF2 flat white. The reason for it, it goes on, it dries very, very quick, and it covers better than anything else I've used to date. So what we're going to do is neat straight into the colour cup, just like that. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just going to pick out these bays. And yes, it is a little bit speckly, but it does it in one coat, one pass, job's done. And also the reason I like it as well is because it's flat and quite rough. Any weathering we do, as in a little bit of post shading perhaps, things like that, stick to it very, very well, and then it gives you nice textures and nice appearances. Let's do that one and this one. Just do that. Okay, so there's the Tomcat base done. We'll just poke that out of the way for a second. The other thing we would say we can do is these the engines as well. If we just dust it round in there, okay, then you sort of blow down the ends, and obviously we're not trying to totally coat it, but we want it to give that appearance of being grey down there. Now the big thing to remember is to keep your air pressure high. So we just turn the compressor on again, and we'll do the same for the other one. Get the air pressure so you're above sort of 25 psi before you start spraying neat, otherwise it will start clogging up and spitting and being horrible. Let's go around there. Obviously on some aircraft, I'm thinking of the modern Hornets, you have ceramic plates in there which are white. Obviously on the Tomcat ones they're not, they're more metal, but having the grey behind, when we get in there and sort of with some pastel and post shading, we can really make some nice effects. Okay, easiest way to hold your undercarriage, you might have noticed on the metal wheels I've actually got them on there now, but by putting the clamp on the middle like that, it won't affect obviously where you're painting. Just come around all areas, all angles, and spray just like that. And then obviously at the moment that will dry back completely flat, but what you can do is a nice little technique I do is dip it into future, into clear, pull it out, let it all run off, and you get a nice glossy undercarriage there. So that's that, and obviously I'll do the rest of the undercarriage, and also I'm going to spray all the insides of the doors and things like that as we go, and I might as well do them on the sprue just because it's easier, and any edges that we're flashing are going to be painted red anyway, so as you can see. But the beauty about doing it like this, and so we're out of paint there, is obviously it does it in one coat, job's done, you can move on. If you're doing it with normal thin, perhaps 50-50 with Tamiya, or perhaps with the pre-thin paints like Valero, you might have to do 2 or 3 coats. Obviously spraying neat, you're just going to have to remember to keep your air pressure up quite high. It does work for satin, it does work for gloss as well.